parents kicked me out at 18 and left me homeless. A decade later, they lost everything, then broke into my house to squat while I was gone. I'm not sharing anything that could identify me, especially not if my parents ever scroll through Reddit. So seriously, don't ask for any info that's not already in here. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and my parents never truly wanted kids. I was an only child, pretty much a surprise pregnancy, according to what some relatives told me. My parents had apparently sworn off kids when they got married. Things were decent early on, but I guess once I stopped being all cute and small, they didn't care to hang out with me much anymore. Both of them worked and ran a business together. That business was everything to them, and I was always just an afterthought. The rest of my family, like my grandparents, were states away, and I didn't really know anything about them until I was grown. So I spent my whole childhood without any family around. Honestly, I was mostly raised by TV and whatever teachers I had at school. My own birthdays by the time I became a teenager were often spent without my parents, as they'd just give me some money and tell me to go out and buy whatever I wanted. It was more or less the same with Christmas, and sometimes even back to school shopping. We wouldn't have even had a Christmas tree after I turned 10 if it weren't for the fact I convinced my parents to buy a fake one I could build up and then take apart later every year. If I were to describe my parents, think of them as those people who always wear black, drink lots of wine, and look down their noses at others. The last I saw of my parents, they still looked and acted the same way, although my father was always wearing a toupee now. When I turned 16, I asked my parents if I could work part-time for them at their business, and they just told me they had no open positions or anything like that. They may as well have just come right out and said they didn't want me there. After I turned 18, my parents informed me that since I was an adult, they expected me to move out as soon as possible. I was working part-time because I was still in high school, and I hadn't saved nearly enough for college. Not long after high school ended, my parents instructed me to pack up and move out. They got an official eviction notice that gave me 30 days and everything. They didn't even help me move. I had to get assistance from a friend's dad who owns a truck. I ended up renting a lousy apartment and working in retail. I had no real-life experience and no time for college. Then, after just a few months, I got fired because my manager genuinely had it out for me and wrote me up for the most ridiculous things. I don't even remember what they were anymore, but I wasn't the only one the manager treated that way. I called corporate about it, and so did a few other people. Corporate looked into the manager, and they were soon fired for various reasons, not many of which I actually know since it was mostly kept quiet, but someone told me theft of cigarettes was a part of it, and the manager was a chain smoker. Corporate refused to rehire me and only said they'd change the record to say I was laid off instead of terminated so my resume would still be clean. Guess they considered me damaged goods or something. I ended up going broke pretty fast because I was terrible at managing my own money and couldn't find steady employment, so I lost my apartment. I went back to my parents begging for help, but they refused to take me in, not even for a little while to get back on my feet. I ended up homeless and living out of a tent in someone's backyard in winter. My friends had all moved on to college, some in other states, and I was a broke kid taking whatever work I could to stay alive. My salvation came when one of my parents' neighbors found out I was living out of a tent and offered to take me in for a little while so I wouldn't freeze. She helped me persuade my parents into telling me how to get in touch with the other members of my estranged family. My parents did not want to say. My guess is it was out of fear of being judged for throwing their son out the way they did, but they provided the information and gave me a list of contact details, then told me not to bother them ever again. I called my grandparents from my father's side of the family, and they were very surprised and happy to hear from me because they hadn't seen me since I was an infant, and I'm their only grandchild. My grandparents, after finding out my situation, flew me over to live with them as soon as they could. They essentially adopted me. My parents didn't even see me off at the airport despite being invited to. I had zero contact with them for almost a decade. My grandparents said they despised my parents for treating me so poorly, and they legally disowned them by striking them from their wills. My parents, I'm told, were not happy to hear that, but also said it didn't really matter because they were plenty well off and didn't need anything from my grandparents. How wrong that statement turned out to be. After about a year of living with my grandparents, I was able to afford to start going to community college. I got an associate's degree, landed a decent job thanks to a recommendation from my grandpa, and eventually, my grandparents offered to sell me their house so they could retire to Arizona. My grandma wanted to live in a warmer climate, as the cold winter was getting harder and harder on her health every year. I was sad to see them go, but I happily bought the house. They sold it to me for 1/3 its value, and I'll have it paid off in a few more years. My job has me going away on the road periodically, so I can end up away from home for weeks at a time. Not that I mind the travel. I have no pets, girlfriend, or anything like that. I wouldn't have time for them right now, but in a few years, when I have some things in order, I'll make time. I don't want to stay a lonely bachelor forever. Then one day in late 2020, I came home after being away for over 2 weeks, only to find a large white van I did not recognize in my driveway. I was getting ready to call the police when I noticed the van had the logo from my parents' business on the side of it, and I felt dread. Yes, my parents were there. They'd broken in somehow and were living out of my home. They had the nerve to greet me like we were buddy-buddy the moment I walked in. I told them to get the hell out, and they refused because it was Grandma and Grandpa's house. I said it wasn't their house anymore. They'd sold it to me when they retired. They would have known that if they were in any way involved with my life, but they threw me to the wolves 10 years prior with no life experience. experience. We argued, and they refused to leave. My father told me it was his parents' house first, and that meant he and my mother had the right to live there if they wanted. I walked right into my bedroom, locked the door, and called the police. When the cops showed up, they were of no help. My parents claimed to them that they had already been there long enough to have residency, which was a complete lie, but I had no cameras to prove they weren't there a month. My neighbors had no cameras either, so it was my word against my parents over how long they'd really been there, and they were claiming squatters' rights. They told the police they had a verbal rental agreement with me, and that I was trying to illegally evict them for no reason. My mother even put on the waterworks when saying that. The police told me it was a family dispute and to file eviction with the courts to get them out. And this was in 2020. Getting to court for anything took longer because of the pandemic. Meanwhile, my parents are squatting in my house rent-free and rubbing it in my face. From the information I received from them, their business went bankrupt and they sold off almost everything they had to pay their debts. All they had left was the van and a few personal belongings, so they expected to live in my house rent-free for the foreseeable future. They were working too. Both of them soon got new jobs. My father as a delivery driver, my mother as a sales associate. They were earning money, and the only things they contributed to were electricity and water utilities, which was essentially just handing me a $100 bill every month and saying I should be grateful they were paying me anything. Anytime I tried to discuss proper rent with them, they just said I owed it to them to live rent-free because I took 18 years of their lives. And it's not like they were demanding the money back for that time. Then they threatened to stop helping with the utilities altogether. I was so at my wit's end that I ended up calling my grandparents to explain the situation to them. They were very unhappy and spoke with my parents, but my parents still claimed they had the right to stay in my home and refused to budge. My grandpa told me he was sorry it had come to this, and that if they hadn't sold me the house, my parents wouldn't have invaded. I told him not to worry. I'd already filed for a legal eviction and would get it soon enough, and my parents already knew that they were on borrowed time. I made sure to say that within earshot of my parents too. They responded with the silent treatment. My father was away most of the time, driving a delivery vehicle 6 days a week, which was a job really not to his liking, and my mother basically tried to take over my house in her spare time. She demanded I let her rearrange my living room and even tried to force me to give her and my father the master bedroom because they were my parents and they deserved better, as she put it. I vetoed both of those things and said they don't deserve better and to stop trying to act like I owe them anything. I didn't ask to be born, and it's a normal obligation for parents to raise their own children. All they were doing was trying to assert dominance to prevent me from kicking them out. Finally, after 4 months and now into early 2021, I managed to take my parents to court over their squatting. We only needed to go to court because they fought the eviction and attempted to gaslight me into rescinding it. They tried to use the fact it was formerly my grandparents' house and that they were giving me $100 a month as some sort of leverage of residency, but there was no actual rental agreement, and they were smart enough not to try and forge one, as that would have been fraud. So the judge ordered that they needed to be out in a maximum of 30 days because they had zero claim on my house. After court, they confronted me and said they were disappointed in me for kicking out my own flesh and blood. I couldn't help but laugh and called them hypocrites, because that's exactly what they did to me without a care in the world for my well-being. They had no love for me, so I have no love for them. I owed them nothing. They just tried to act like everything that was mine was theirs, but they had no right to call themselves my parents because they've never really acted like it. I called them a pair of snobby, lying narcissists to their faces and told them to get their affairs in order because they already know I won't hesitate to call the police if they don't leave my house when the 30 days are over. My father looked enraged, but my mother stopped him from saying or doing anything by grabbing his shoulder and shaking her head. He sneered at me and walked away. They left, but not without a lot of tension. That final month was spent with them either guilting me to try and make me change my mind or completely ignoring me. I put up a calendar in the living room and checked off each day before they had to leave using a red marker. The exact day they were to be out was marked with a big red circle. I still remember that final day was March 2nd. My parents waited until the exact day they had to leave my home for good before they finally left. Even when all their stuff was out of the house, they were sleeping on the floor in the guest room for a few days. Since they were so convinced they could make me let them stay, they didn't bother to look for an apartment until after the court eviction went through. My mother spent weeks scrambling to find an apartment. They had to get a tiny, crappy studio apartment in the next city over because it was the only thing they could find on such short notice. A lot like what I had to do when I was 18. Quite ironic. I drove my mother over to see it once, and the apartment was terrible. The walls were baby barf green. The carpet looked like it was 20 years old. The only window just had a view of a brick wall outside. There was no dishwasher. The stove was the smallest one I'd ever seen, and the toilet looked like it really needed to be replaced. The walls also did little to stop noise from neighbors. There were already 2 people loudly fighting in the adjacent apartment while we were there. My mother went out of her way to try and give me sad looks while dropping hints that I should feel guilty that I was reducing them to live in such a place. But I just acted oblivious to it all until she finally stopped. They signed the lease right away and moved what little stuff they had into the apartment over the weekend. They also ended up demanding the queen-size bed, dresser, and flat-screen TV from my guest room. I told them to just take the damn things because I no longer wanted them in the house after they spent 5 months sleeping in that room. They looked at me as if I treated them like they were diseased and demanded nothing more. The moment they had to leave for good, I began changing changing the locks on all exterior doors. All their belongings were at the apartment, and they had spent their last night in my guest room. They watched me start removing the old lock from the front door as they got into the van. They said nothing. I said nothing, but they just sat and watched me for a while until I had the new doorknob on. Then they finally left. I breathed a massive sigh of relief the second that van went down the road. I figured karma had finally caught up with them, and they could live under a rock for all I cared. But nope, my grandparents heard from them recently. They'd called to brag that they had a new business similar to their old one in the same state where I'm living now, and they are pretty much on track to be right back where they used to be in life prior to the pandemic, which was making good money and looking down on others. I've already Googled their new business, and it seems like it's doing well. They have many positive reviews and everything. I'm pretty friggin' resentful, truth be told. They put me through being homeless, squatted for next to free at my house for months, then went right back to being the snobby wine-drinking business people they used to be. If karma is real, it's taking too damn long. Edit. I would like to thank everyone for all the constructive advice, and many of the points being made about selling the house I'm realizing have merit. I've asked my grandparents if it'd be a good idea if I moved closer to them. They told me that if I want to sell the house, then to go right ahead. My parents will have no clue where I am if I move away, so I'm heavily considering it now. I'm gonna see if the company I work for can transfer me down south. I think I wouldn't mind the warmer climate anyway. I've hated winter since the time I had to live in a tent. I don't have many friends where I currently am, as I'm kind of a loner, so it wouldn't be too difficult to start over somewhere farther away. I'm attached to this house, but it's not like I grew up in it, so I will consider moving. Yes, I understand the need for more cameras, and I will be looking into that. For those wondering how my parents broke in and fooled the police, well, it's stupidly simple. My parents got in through a window I forgot to lock. They just pulled the screen off and opened it to get right in. Then they found my spare house keys I kept hanging on a hook near the kitchen and copied them. When claiming squatters' rights to the police, as well as saying we had a prior verbal agreement, my parents presented working house keys to the cops and lied their little asses off, saying I'd let them move in. My parents had also already filed for an address change with the DMV online before I'd even gotten home, and showed police a printout of that, saying their new IDs with my address were soon to be in the mail. The cops just looked annoyed, told me it was a domestic issue, and to file to evict them like a normal person. I wish I'd gotten their badge numbers to report them. Small addition. Yes, my parents had their mail redirected to my house, which is another thing they used to claim residency. The thing is that if they'd lived in my house for more than 30 days with permission, squatters' rights would make them tenants. They claimed they had my permission and used every dirty trick available to convince the police they had the right to be there. There was no way for them to confirm or deny how long my parents had been living in the house, and it turned into a situation of everybody pointing fingers, and the police didn't know whom to believe. That's why I had to go to court to evict them. I did refuse to give my parents the Wi-Fi password while they lived with me though, since they were not contributing to that utility. However, they just used their smartphones to run a mobile hotspot and access the internet that way the whole time they were squatting in my house. Those of you saying that I should leave bad reviews or expose my parents' past, there really is no point. I'm gonna take the high road there and just forget about them. However, if they committed fraud to start that new business of theirs, then I'll get some popcorn when that comes back on them, because they'd inevitably call someone for help. Edit 2. For those who don't believe the 30-day thing with squatters, here's a direct USA law on the matter. In most areas, anyone who lives on your property for more than 30 days with permission can claim rights, as in the eyes of the law, they become your tenants. When this happens, you will usually need to carry out an eviction procedure. However, in the case where permission was never given and an unoccupied property is forcibly entered and lived in, there are still rules you must follow. My parents falsified permission and lied about how long they'd been in my house. That's why it took 5 months to get rid of them. Now you know. Update. Well, I decided to make some inquiries and spent a couple of days asking around the family about how my parents got their new business off the ground. It's pretty unusual that they were able to come back from bankruptcy and get a new business started in under 2 years. No, it's not an MLM for those who thought so. Even my parents wouldn't resort to doing that crap. They undoubtedly think MLMs are beneath them. My parents' new business is comparatively smaller than their previous one too. I'd say about half the size. Before, they had at least 2 employees. Now, it's just the 2 of them. Someone pointed out I should be watching my credit for identity theft. I already was and have been since I first started dealing with my parents squatting in my house. I put nothing past them, and they knew it. Honestly though, I'm not sure they even bothered to remember my legal information in the past decade anyway. Hell, I'm not sure they bothered to even remember how to spell my first name. But I did lock down my credit, and there has been no unusual activity on it at all. So my parents didn't try to steal their company funds from me, at least. My paternal grandparents, or my good grandparents, one would say, are the ones who actually care about me. They have no idea where my parents got their money to open up shop again. My parents have called them numerous times since they disinherited my father, and they have been refusing to take their calls after they called to brag about their new success a while ago. It's clear my parents had no help from my father's side of the family. So what about my mother's side? Well, I still had that old list of contacts my parents gave me filed away. On that list was the landline number for my maternal grandmother. I did try calling my maternal grandmother back when I was homeless. She didn't care at all. I've never met them in person, but my maternal grandparents are a lot like my parents. Guess my father truly found his soulmate with my mother. As a prior commenter pointed out, they were made for each other. I managed to get in touch with my maternal grandmother once again. Not only was she long divorced from her husband, but my maternal grandfather is no longer alive. That was news to me. He passed away 7 months ago, and he left my mother a sizable inheritance. So yeah, that's where they got the money to open up shop again. My maternal grandmother sounded so proud of them too. She had little interest in discussing much else. It's likely why my parents called my grandparents to brag about how they are so successful again. They wanted to rub salt in the wound since my good grandparents cut them off. I really don't care though, and neither do my good grandparents. Everyone on my paternal side of the family says my parents can go kick rocks. They want nothing to do with them. I'm not the only one my parents have jaded. My mother's side of the family is full of divorcees and drunken loners who all despise each other and just pretend to act civil. My father's side consists of what I'd call very normal and nice people. My father, though, burned bridges time and time again. When I was born, my grandparents wanted to be in my life, but for some reason, my parents kept me from them. Why they did this, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's because they didn't want to be judged on their parenting. I'd have been happier if they'd sent me to boarding school or to live with my grandparents. But I guess narcissists aren't truly happy if they don't have someone else to put down. I can only imagine the things they said about me behind my back my entire life. Either way, it seems my parents did nothing illegal to open a new business, nothing that can be reported to anything like the IRS anyway. There's no law against using funds from inheritance as seed money for self-employment. My mother, like me, was an only child, so she got everything when her father died, including his house and land. That's where my parents are living now. I've seen a photo my maternal grandmother sent me. It's not the nicest house, but not bad. Comparable to my own, I'd say. But it means my parents have a place to live scot-free now and likely won't need to bother me again. I want to sell my house and move, but it turns out the company I'm employed with has no branch in Arizona, so it's either I quit and look for new employment in Arizona after selling my house, or I just stay where I am and hope my parents leave me alone. I'm looking into job searching because I really don't want my parents to ever find me again. I won't move if it's not feasible, but I'd prefer to be able to. It'd be a moot point to bother getting more cameras for the house if I want to sell it as soon as possible. But if I end up stuck here because I'm unable to find another job in Arizona in the coming months, I might as well get cameras installed inside and outside. I've received a lot of great advice on the types of cameras to get and where to place them. I kind of doubt the same situation will ever repeat, but I just don't want my parents to ever try to seek me out again for any reason. If they need help when they're old, I'm not going to care. They'll get what they gave. Nothing. They're dead to me for the rest of my life, and the rest of my father's side of the family says the same. If I ever become a parent or step-parent, I'll make damn sure I never become like my parents. No child deserves that. Story 2. Am I the asshole for eating sexy potatoes? It honestly feels ridiculous that I have to post this, but my coworker has been getting onto me about this for weeks now, so I have to ask. My whole life, I've been eating potatoes by microwaving them, then biting into them, eating them hot dog style. This is the easiest, most convenient, and intuitive way for me to eat potatoes, sweet potatoes, or regular. I think this is how people in Japan eat them. Or at least, this is how I was taught by my Japanese parents to eat them. Whenever I go to a grocery store, I always pick out the most easily biteable potatoes, which are generally longer and thinner than most potatoes. I work in an office of about 30 people. We all usually bring our own lunch, and I typically just eat at my desk while doing work. No one has ever commented on how I eat potatoes, but I do eat them quite frequently. Recently, a new person was hired, and she clearly has a problem with the way I eat potatoes. A couple of times, she pulled me aside and asked me to just eat potatoes a more normal way. I asked her what she meant, and she said I was eating potatoes too suggestively. I was a bit surprised because I basically just have my eyes glued to my screen whenever I'm eating and hardly pay attention to how I eat. I told her no one else seemed to have an issue with the way I eat potatoes, but she insisted others were just too polite to say anything. I asked a few other coworkers who were just as puzzled as I was about what she was saying. I figured no one else really had a problem with it, but this happened multiple times. She kept coming to me and asking me to tone down the way I eat, even accusing me of going out of my way to choose sexy potatoes. I've thought about bringing them other ways, but this is just the easiest way for me to eat them, and they're really delicious like this to me. I asked her to maybe just not watch me eat, but apparently that's just not possible. Unfortunately, she reported me, and now I have a meeting with HR next week. This seems really dumb to me, but am I the asshole for eating sexy potatoes? Edit. Thank you for the gold, and thank you to everyone who gave tips on how to approach HR. I will update after the meeting. Edit 2. Please stop asking me for videos of me eating potatoes. It's creepy and weird, and also, it would be extremely boring and the least sexy thing you'll ever watch. Edit 3. Because I've gotten a ton of comments asking how to microwave a potato, scrub the potato thoroughly with a sponge to remove dirt, stab the potato with a fork or knife all over, then put it in the microwave for about 5 minutes, more or less depending on the size of the potato and power of the microwave. Then flip and do the same thing. To tell if it's done, poke through the center with a knife or fork. You can generally tell how soft it is by stabbing through it. The texture will be relatively intuitive. Make sure you let the potato cool for at least 10 minutes, potentially longer, or it'll be too hot to eat. When you're ready to consume, I usually hold it wrapped in a napkin. I'm sacrilegious, so I eat the skin, but you don't have to. I'll sometimes add butter or regular potatoes, though I normally just sprinkle some salt as I eat it. Sweet potatoes, I just eat as is. Either way, you'll probably need to drink water or some liquid with it. Enjoy. Update. update. So I had a couple of meetings with HR. The first one was on my own yesterday morning, alone with the HR woman. According to her, a coworker had reported me for sexual harassment and creating a hostile work environment, not going to lie. After hearing those accusations, I was honestly pretty scared. Sexual harassment is a really serious charge. I was allegedly making lewd gestures while eating, despite repeatedly being asked to stop. I told her exactly what had happened. I was eating potatoes the same way I always had in the 4 years I've worked in this office. No one else had ever had a problem with this until now. The new coworker, let's call her Karen, approached me, telling me I was eating potatoes inappropriately and told me to eat them another way. I had explained to her that this was how I grew up eating them and would not stop. If it bothered her, she could and should look away. I continued eating potatoes this way. Then over the next several weeks, she kept complaining about my potatoes every time I ate them this way. As I explained my side, I could tell HR was getting really annoyed. I don't think she believed that this was all there was to it. She pressed for more information. Are you sure you didn't do anything to make her believe you were being inappropriate? Are you sure you weren't harassing her, even unintentionally? I told her I never even talked to her unless it was about work or if she approached me first. HR thanked me for coming in and told me she'd get back to me. I think she met with Karen after that. Then, later in the day, we had a meeting with the three of us. Karen says that I lied about not doing anything to make her uncomfortable. After the first time she came to me, asking me to eat my potatoes differently, I dismissed it as a joke, which to be fair, I did because, deadass, who wouldn't take it as a joke? Then she claimed that after each time she asked me to tone it down, I escalated by choosing increasingly sexy potatoes to eat in front of her. By that point, I'm pretty sure HR was trying hard not to roll her eyes. I responded by telling Karen I gave zero thought about her when I bought my potatoes and selected them based on ease of cooking and eating. She accused me of making eye contact with her while I was eating, which I think I did every time she watched me eat because it's really uncomfortable having someone watch me eat. I explained this and told her I had repeatedly asked her to stop watching me eat. She then pointed out that no one else eats potatoes this way and the only reason I would do so is to try to be provocative. I swear to God, HR almost laughed at her. I just showed her a video of Japanese people eating potatoes with their hands and biting into them. The HR woman knows me and knows I'm not the type to harass someone or deliberately create a hostile work environment. And in the end, she said something like, "I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. Perhaps it really would be best to look another way while your coworker is eating," basically trying to politely tell Karen to get her head out of her ass. Then Karen tried to turn it around by claiming I was making a hostile work environment by telling our other coworkers bad things about her. But literally all I had done was ask others if they were uncomfortable with the way I eat and explained why I had asked them. She tried yet another angle, claiming that the way I ate them, with my hands, was a COVID risk and that I was putting the safety of the office in jeopardy by eating this way. HR then said that if she was so concerned, she was welcome to work from home, as is currently company policy. I work in hardware, so it's tougher for me to work from home, but Karen works in support, so it would be quite easy for her to work from home. Eventually, Karen had to concede she had nothing left, so we were all dismissed. Later, I talked to my coworker who had stopped bringing curry because of Karen, let's call him Surya, about the issues I had with her. He had been unable to eat his usual Indian lunches in the office because of her. We were both very annoyed, and honestly, I just felt extremely uncomfortable being in an office where she was constantly judging Asian people's food, so I decided to file a report with HR, as suggested by many of you. I pointed out how she was harassing Asian people for their food choices, and many of her comments towards me were bordering on sexual harassment. Surya agreed to bring curry for lunch today, and, in solidarity, I brought some too, along with my potatoes. Karen didn't comment at all, but she did give us dirty looks and made disgusted faces a few times. I actually got called into a meeting this afternoon with my boss, who is also one of the founders of the company. He confessed that he didn't like Karen either, and that she had multiple complaints about her within the first month of her being hired. She's been here just under 2, and that he had hired her as a favor to his wife because she is his wife's cousin and had lost her job due to COVID. I wonder why they chose to let her go. He apologized to me on her behalf and assured me that he would talk to her. I decided to keep my harassment claim with HR and have another meeting tomorrow. We'll see how this goes. Thank you all for your tips and suggestions. I will keep eating sexy potatoes for the foreseeable future. Update. So I posted a few weeks ago on a different subreddit about a really difficult to deal with Karen coworker. You can read about it on my profile if you're interested. TLDR, I eat potatoes hot dog style, holding them in my hands and biting down, which is common in Japan, where my parents are from. For some reason, she was always really annoyed by this and claimed I was sexually harassing her by eating potatoes suggestively. Then she reported me to HR for supposedly escalating over the weeks by deliberately choosing to eat increasingly sexy potatoes. She had also previously given another coworker, Surya, grief for bringing Indian food to the office, and he stopped for a while. I decided to file a counter complaint to HR for cultural insensitivity and sexual harassment. I was really uncomfortable with her watching me eat and sexualizing it. I got a lot of requests for updates, but the original subreddit didn't let me post it, so I got permission from the mods to post it here since it really is a fuck you Karen post. Hopefully, the people who requested the updates can see it. Something I hadn't mentioned in the original post is that I'm a gay woman, which is known in the office. However, I didn't mention this because it wasn't relevant until now. Karen lost it the other day when Surya brought a lovely tikka masala to share. He's done this before the pandemic, and the kitchen is separate from the rest of the office. office, so you can't actually smell anything microwaved unless you're in the kitchen. She said it was really rude of him to keep bringing curries to the office, and that no one confronted him because they were trying to be polite. Most people were enjoying the food he brought. He said in his home country, really well-spiced curries were extremely common. People bring them, microwave them in the office all the time, and it's among some of the most popular takeout food. He had no reason to believe it wouldn't be the same here. Karen snapped back that we weren't in India, but Surya just said he's from London. Karen didn't really have a response to that. Karen confronted me in the parking lot after my HR complaint, claiming I was trying to spite her with the hard-boiled eggs I had eaten at lunch, even though I'm definitely not the only one who eats them in the office. I guess eggs are now too sexy too. She said my harassment complaint was discriminating against her for being Christian, and I was making her deliberately uncomfortable by throwing my sexuality in her face. She knew she couldn't say that because she'd be called homophobic. I honestly had no idea she was uncomfortable with gay people, and to be honest, that's not my problem, but she said that my putting a pride sticker on my laptop a few days after she started working here was the start of my escalation. According to her, my behavior was retaliatory to her having Bible verses on her desk. Then here's the kicker. Apparently, I was using my girlfriend, my relatively high-pitched voice, and my eating to get men in the office to lust after me, implying that Japanese Asian women try way too hard to be sexually appealing. I would have gone off on her for being homophobic and racist, with stereotypes I honestly had never heard of before, but I was tired and told her if my existence was bothering her, that's not my problem, and she should just work from home. I also subtly mentioned that maybe this was why she was laid off from her last job. Well, she filed another harassment claim, saying I was targeting her for religious discrimination. Like, what the fuck? I just want to eat my perfectly innocent food in peace, and somehow it turned into a whole religious and racial war. I told HR what had happened, then Karen claimed I was trying to paint her in a bad light. My boss later talked to me privately and apologized. I think Karen is now working remotely, thank God, since I haven't seen her since last week. If she ever mentions anything about my harmless eating, my sexual orientation, or my race again, I'll definitely file another complaint with HR. But for now, I think I'm happy with eating sexy potatoes and eggs in peace.